Eccoci, siamo online, vedo che stanno arrivando i primi partecipanti, quindi attendiamo qualche secondo. Prima di partire vi chiedo cortesemente di confermarmi in chat che per voi l'audio è ok, vedete lo schermo, tutto ok, mi bastano un paio di risposte. Vediamo ok. Audio e schermo ok, perfetto, è arrivato il feedback. Grazie a tutti. Allora, io sono Fabiana, Community Manager in Codemotion. Benvenuti al Meetup Aperitech Online Edition di questa sera con la community di Angular Roma. Quelli che vedete sono i canali per conoscere tutta la programmazione dei Meetup online, che ovviamente da quando siamo nella situazione emergenza sono diventati tutti online, quindi collegatevi al canale Telegram, potete seguire il Dev Calendar oppure iscrivervi al gruppo Facebook, alla Tech Community su Facebook, Codemotion Tech Community, per accedere anche ad altri contenuti, come anche alle registrazioni post Meetup, contenuti dei nostri members, e oltre alla piattaforma Community che tutti conoscete, da cui vi siete iscritti, vi invito a seguire anche gli aggiornamenti sulla piattaforma Events di Codemotion, dove sono presenti anche la programmazione dei webinar online. Queste sono le attività che abbiamo intensificato in questo periodo, le attività online, quindi oltre ai già citati online meetups e free webinar, le Coding Challenge, il Dev Magazine e i training programs, tutto disponibile sulla piattaforma codemotion.com. Dev Lunchbox è un nuovo format che abbiamo lanciato in questo periodo. Potete connettervi tutti i giorni a mezzogiorno sulla codemotion.com e seguire in streaming un contenuto, ogni giorno un topic e uno speaker diverso. Hanno la durata dai 5 ai 20 minuti proprio per condividere, diciamo, il pranzo insieme. Questa è la conferenza, la prima conferenza online italiana dedicata al deep learning che Codemotion ha organizzato con la community di deep learning. Vedete sotto il link e anche un QR code che potete già utilizzare per accedere direttamente al sito dove trovare tutte le informazioni e per iscrivervi il 27 maggio in orario pomeridiano dalle 2 alle 7 del pomeriggio. Questi sono i meetup in programma in questa settimana. Vi aspetto giovedì al primo Meetup Tech Quiz di Codemotion. Sarà un appuntamento molto divertente, più siamo meglio è. Ci sfideremo con delle domande, con un quiz online. Le domande sono sia per junior che per senior, quindi iscrivetevi che ci sarà. Insomma, sarà una cosa molto divertente per prepararci poi al prefestivo, in poche parole. Per partecipare, per interagire direttamente con lo speaker a cui lascio la parola a brevissimo, potete utilizzare due modalità. Utilizzando il Raise Hand potete prenotare il vostro intervento live. Se non ve la sentite potete scriverci le vostre domande in chat e i ragazzi della community di Angular Roma le leggeranno per voi. Ovviamente cerchiamo magari di intensificare le domande a fine talk, quindi vi aspetto più tardi. La mia presentazione è terminata. In questo momento posso lasciare la parola e presentarvi lo speaker di stasera che è Tamas. Just a second, Tamas, because I'm gonna give you the possibility to share the screen. Ok. Ok. Now you can share your screen and see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so because I need to share my screen, GoToMeeting is telling me to restart GoToMeeting because of a security setting. So 1 second and I'll be back. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. We wait here for you. We didn't check this option before starting the webinar, so so we wait for more attendees while you do the restart. Ok. Nel frattempo, ragazzi, chi di voi ci dice qualcosa in più sulla community, ci vuole raccontare delle attività in programma? Perché penso che proprio in 2 minuti tornerà Tamas, quindi non è un problema.
Sì, intanto grazie Fabiana per averci dato ancora una volta lo spazio per far presentare un po' di community e per far sì che la community cresca con i vari topic su Angular. Tanto è tornato pure Tamas.
Infatti,
Niente, noi siamo una community romana e cerchiamo un po' di mantenere attiva tutto quello che è la tecnologia sul mondo dello sviluppo web con Angular. E io lascerei la parola a Tamas da adesso, così che poi parliamo un po' di più della community e facciamo un bel panel con tutte le domande dei partecipanti. Grazie a tutti.
Okay. Tamas, are you okay now?
Yes, so
Perfect.
can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we confirm.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'll do it this way. I'll put this away and we should be good to go. Okay, so first of all, welcome and thank you very much for this opportunity to allow me to deliver this talk. I wanted to do this in person because I love Rome. I used to live in Rome as well, so I do miss the city a bit. But given the current circumstances, I think this is the best that we can do. So today I want to talk to you about a little bit about Jamstack and a little bit about this thing called Scully. Now, of course, I put, Dennis Scully here. For those of you who are familiar with the X-Files, you know who this person is. The presentation has absolutely nothing to do with the X-Files, though. Okay, so we're going to strictly talk about Scully, the static site generator. So you can already see me, I think the cam is on, but it's a wonderful picture of me anyway. So my name is Tamas, as I was introduced. I work as a developer evangelist at a company called Cloudinary. I also have a training business, which is called Full Stack Training. And I also happen to be a Google developer expert in web technologies. So if you're ever curious about, anything related to the Jamstack, I do tweet a lot about this topic. So you can follow me on Twitter as well. And you can see the Twitter handle on this slide on the top. So as part of this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the Jamstack because I want to make sure that you all understand what the Jamstack is, its components, why it matters, and why it's gaining a lot of popularity. And then I'm going to show you a demo application that I put together that uses one of the first static site generators that are available and that are out there today, which is for the Jamstack, which is of course called Scully. Okay, so if you know the Jamstack, then you may hear things that you're new, so please just bear with me because I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to understanding what this stack is about. So the Jamstack is, probably you all know that, it's JavaScript, API, and markup, but that's not really meaningful. So what I like to show is this quote from Phil Hawksworth, who is an employee of Netlify. And he had to say that the Jamstack, excuse me, is really just a modern architecture that allows developers to create fast and secure sites and dynamic applications using JavaScript APIs and pre-rendered markup served without web servers. And there are quite a lot of important pieces of information in this quote, right? The fact that Jamstack sites are fast, they are secure, they are dynamic, they use JavaScript APIs and pre-rendered markup. And I think the last one is really curious because he said, you can serve all of this without web servers. Now, if you look at this quote, and if you're not very familiar with the Jamstack, you're thinking, how can I have a web application or a website that runs without a web server? So I think this quote should be kind of better said, or this without web servers, but it could be replaced by saying that it could be served without an origin server. So what is an origin server? So an origin server is basically just a computer that has an application running on it, and typically that application is a web server like Apache or Express in a Node.js environment. So you have some sort of a web server, and this origin server, the responsibility for the origin server is really just accept incoming requests and produce a response. Okay, that's simply put what an origin server is doing. So if you think about classic web development stacks like the LAMP stack, for example, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. In this particular setup, if you worked in this, then you probably know everything about this stack. But basically, you have some PHP code intermixed with some HTML. That PHP code can execute maybe a SQL query that goes to a database. grabs the data, and on the server, it generates the entire HTML structure, and it is that HTML structure that gets sent to the requesting party. In this case, the requesting party being the browser itself, right? So that's why I see the list of departments, which is a result of this PHP code execution, which in turn then queried some database. So in this case, we do have an origin server. The origin server is our actual Linux box, the Apache server, the application server that generates this code. The other important thing to remember here is that when I open up my browser, and in this case, type in localhost to see that department list, the data that I see there is being generated at request time, right? I request the page, PHP gets executed, does its job, and returns me the data. This all happens at request time. And in the same way, if we move along the timeline a little bit, we have the mean stack, Mongo Express, Angular, and Node. Again, here we have an origin server, which is a Node.js server probably running Express as the web server. And again, if I open my page, in this case, this is a contact manager. So if I open this contact manager, what happens is that at request time, there's some stuff happening behind the scenes, right? There's a table being generated, but the data gets pulled from an API that runs on Node.js and Express somewhere in the backend. Data comes back, gets populated in the table. Angular renders the view or the component view based on the template, and this is the result that I see. Again, everything happens at request time. So if you're not using an origin server, what is that we can use in a Jamstack? And the thing that we can use is called an edge server. So Jamstack sites are actually deployed on edge servers. Now, if the edge server is a term that's new to you, if I will explain to you what the edge server is, you will have another term in your mind, and that's also an edge server. And trust me, it's going to be something that you've come across many, many times. You just maybe didn't know that it's an edge server. So basically, an edge server is a set of computers that are distributed globally, and their only task is to deliver content to you as fast as possible based on your geographical location. Okay, so if you think about this description, another term for the edge server is, of course, a CDN, right? A content delivery network. And I'm sure that you have all used a CDN before to include some sort of JavaScript framework or JavaScript library or a CSS framework into your application. And today, we use these CDNs primarily to host some static CSS and JavaScript content, sometimes some images as well, of course, and serve that to the requesting parties. Okay, so all these CDNs, all these edge servers do is really just store some static content, which they then distribute to the requesting parties. So the approach to the Jamstack is that if you don't have an origin server, then you need to store your files somewhere, and those files should not only be your CSS and JavaScript files, but they should also include some static HTML files. Okay, so what you do, you somehow magically create some static HTML, you add your CSS, you add your JavaScript to it, you put everything on a CDN edge or an edge server, and that is now available for your users. We're going to get into the detail of this just to clarify what I talk about now, but for now, just remember that the approach that the Jamstack follows is that you have some static content, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, put that on an edge server, and that's where it gets served from the user, avoiding us to have a need for an origin server. Okay, so if you remember from that quote, I said that you need to pre-render your markup. And pre-rendering markup means that we somehow need to generate our static HTML or just HTML based on the templates that we specify. And this is when we need to talk about this thing called the static site generators. Also, if you will work with the Jamstack, there are going to be some particular terms that you're going to come across, and I try to show you some of those terms and explain what those mean. So a static site generator, and the only job of a static site generator is to take a particular template, which is written in JavaScript or in HTML or whatever templating syntax language you want to use, and generate an HTML file for each of the possible routes ahead of time for your application. And the key here is that when you work with a Jamstack, as opposed to the LAMP and to the mean stacks, where requesting a page meant that the page generation happens at request time. With the Jamstack, the generation of the static HTML or the HTML pages happens at build time, so ahead of time. So all the HTML is pre-rendered or statically generated ahead of time, which means you can take the static HTML and put it onto an edge server, and then your users can access that. So there's a lot of static site generators out there in the Jamstack that developers can use. Here's a list, right? So there's React-based ones, there's Vue-based ones, Gatsby, Nux, Next, Gridsome. There's a vanilla JavaScript static site generator that goes by the name of Eventi. There's actually Ruby and Go-based static site generators available as well, Jekyll and Hugo. And of course, as of earlier this year, we now have Scully, which is an Angular-based static site generator. Now, at this point, people usually ask me, so, you just said that Jamstack is JavaScript, APIs, and markup, yet here you're talking about Ruby and Go. So how does that work? So what I want you to realize is that these static site generators that you see here are not related to the JavaScript bit of the Jamstack, but they are relevant to the M, which is the markup, okay? So the static site generators allow us to pre-render the markup. What language I use to pre-render the markup doesn't matter. I could use, Hugo, which is a Go-based static site generator, to generate my static HTML. That works. So this, the list of tools that you see here are not related to the J part, they are related to the M part. But of course, we're going to focus on Scully. But I thought to, actually, this was a request from Luciano, I think. So you may have heard about Angular Universal, or you may use Angular Universal, and then you're wondering, why was there a need to create maybe another tool that does something very similar to Angular Universal, and then, why are we even here talking about Scully? So I tried to highlight a few differences that you may encounter when you work with Universal and when you work with Scully. So first of all, Angular Universal cannot read content from files. So you can't provide a set of markdown files for Angular Universal and say, here's the folder for my markdown files, generate HTML content from it. With Scully, you can do that. Actually, if you take a look at the Scully docs, they have a pre-configured setup whereby they allow you to create a full-blown blog based on just markdown files that you put into a folder called posts. Okay, so Scully goes through the posts folder, reads all the markdown files, and generates an HTML file for every single markdown file for you. That's not something that Angular Universal would be able to do out of the box. Now, Angular Universal can also do pre-rendering for the pages, but you need to manually select the routes that you want to pre-render, right? So you can specify what routes you want to sort of statically generate using Angular Universal. With Scully, that whole thing is automatic. So Scully automatically scans your Angular application, and it's going to create a static HTML page per each route that it finds. Plus, it allows you to configure how to statically generate additional routes as well. And it has some CLI options that allow you to actually scan for routes ahead of time, so you can actually see what route is going to generate static files for. And then Angular Universal, so I personally used it in a few projects. I found it very difficult sometimes to make it do what I wanted it to do. Scully is, on the other hand, was built purposefully for static site generation for Angular. Okay, so it has that sort of mindset to do that one thing that it was done for, right? So it's very easy to use. It's very straightforward. It's meant to be used as a static site generator. That's it. So I think in my little experience of using Scully, I just find it to be simpler than Angular Universal has ever been. Okay, so we also need to talk about headless CMSs because headless CMS is another big topic that falls under the Jamstack umbrella. And every time when I think about a headless CMS, kind of this image pops into my mind. And hopefully now you will think the same. So you're welcome. But on a more serious note, so a headless CMS is a headless content management system. And a very easy way to understand this is, if you think about a classic CMS, And of course, when I say classic CMS, 99.9% of the people would by default think of WordPress. So if you think about WordPress and if you use WordPress, you know that it has a sort of backend layer where you add your posts, you manage your categories, your topics, your users, and it also provides you with a front-end interface for which you can build and purchase templates, right? But what's important to understand is that the backend and the front end of a WordPress application is very tightly coupled, right? There's no way that one can exist without the other. So a headless CMS is called a headless CMS because the presentation layer and the database layer are decoupled. So a headless CMS gives you ways to manage your user, ways to manage your content, but it doesn't enforce you to, how that content is actually presented. And there are two types of headless CMSs that we differentiate, API-based and Git-based ones. Again, there's a lot of headless CMSs out there, so Strapi, Netlify CMS, Contentful, Cosmic.js, Pernetic, Storybook, etc. The list could go on. Each of them do different things. Strapi is something that you need to host. Storybook is a hosted CMS. They work with different technologies, but what matters is that you can manage your content using a headless CMS, and you can now tap into your headless CMS and digest the content in any application that you want, which is very useful for the Jamstack because you can take data from a headless CMS, take your static site generator, write some logic, and then statically generate HTML files that has content that has been pulled from a headless CMS. Now, I kept on saying that, we can generate static files, static HTML, static site generators. But when I say static, I don't actually mean that your application just needs to be 100% static, right? It's not that we're generating a static HTML that is not capable of doing anything. And this is when the A comes into the picture. So that's the second letter in the Jamstack. We can make our application really dynamic and add very cool features to it just by using an API provider. And I put two quotes up here, standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's an API for that. So the first quote, standing on the shoulders of giants, means that just think about something as simple as a contact form, right? So you're a web developer, you now have to create a contact form. So you build the HTML for it, and then there has to be some sort of an action, some sort of a backend code that will process your contact form, right? So you need to write something in the backend that takes the name, the message, it sends an email to you and sends maybe an email to the person who filled out the contact form saying, yeah, we received your email. So you have to immediately think about the infrastructure and how you create a backend code for something as simple as a contact form. But we also just established that we don't have an origin server. We do not have a place to execute server-side code. So how can a contact form work? So by using a company that creates or allows you to create contact forms like FormSpree, you can very easily just add a contact form capability to your Jamstack application without the need to have a backend. And they take care of all of the infrastructure, right? And this is true for all the API providers. If you need payments, I think I have a slide here. So if you need payments, you can have, Stripe, images, Cloudinary. If you want your application to send text messages, you can use Twilio, Forms for FormSpree. You can also get entire e-commerce checkout flows and a complete e-commerce platform added to your app just by using the Snipcart APIs. And what's great about this is, these companies do one thing, right? Auth0 only deals with authentication. Stripe only deals with payments. So they are domain experts in their own fields, meaning that they know what they are doing. If now your application also needs to accept 100,000 payments instead of the 100 that you were expecting, the underlying infrastructure and architecture of Stripe is going to take care of the scaling for you. You don't need to worry about, oh, how do I manage my servers now? Everything is going to be taken care of for you automatically. And the other quote is, there's an API for that. I don't know if you remember when the first iPhone came out, then Apple put a lot of advertising behind their app store. And there was this saying that said, oh, there's an app for that, because there was an app available in the app store for literally anything that you wanted to do. So I have the feeling that in today's web ecosystem, there's an API for that. No matter what you want to do, I guarantee you there is an API for achieving what you want to do, right? So just use that ecosystem that's available. And also I have, functions as a service and serverless mentioned on this side, because, we don't have a server to execute server-side code, but if there's a need for that, we can just leverage functions as a service or serverless functions to do very specific server-side code execution, and then utilize the response from that in a Jamstack application. So these are ways to make your application more dynamic. So at a very high level, if you take a look at a very typical Jamstack site from a user's perspective, a user will go and request a page, and that page will be returned to that user from the closest CDN server to the user. And if another user requests a page, then another CDN server will serve that site, right? So the entire application lives on these CDN edge servers. Now, the experience from a developer also changes, because if you think about it, most of the time when you work on an application, you say, oh, I'm just going to git push and git commit something. You push your changes to GitHub. And now with these service providers that are out there, such as Netlify, AWS Amplify, or what used to be called Zeit, which is now a company called Vercel, they can basically integrate with, or you can hook up GitHub with any of these providers, and they will actually notice Git commits, and they will say, okay, you just committed the change, which means you now have a new site available. And what they're going to do, they will push the latest version of your website out to their global CDN. And again, they take care of a lot for us. They basically invalidate the CDN cache, they push the new site, and they make that available for the user, and they do it in a very seamless way. There's no downtime to the user. So when the next time the user requests the page, they will see the newly updated page. Now, I'm not going to get into this because I want to already talk about Scully, but there's a lot of additional benefits for the Jamstack: performance, cost planning, maintenance, deployment, and security. Do check them out. I'm also going to give you a resource where you can learn more about these, and I explain also more about this in a video course, which I'm going to give access to you. I could go on, but I will not. Instead, I am going to jump into my demo about Scully. So in light of this, I am going to change to my editor. Hopefully this text size is large enough, so I'll just open this file. Can you easily read the text, or should I make it larger? I see little nods. I get, okay.
Yes, it's
okay.
Quite clear.
Cool, excellent. So what I have here, let's start with source app. Okay, so what I have here is a really simple Angular application. Okay, there's nothing special that I did or added here. So I just created an Angular app which lazy loads some of the roots. So I have about, articles, and home. Here's the routing for it, right? There's nothing special. If you've seen Angular, and I'm sure everyone here has seen Angular code, you know what I'm showing here. Okay, so there's a home module, there's articles, and there's about. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an ng-serve to take a look at this application so that we see the actual result of this. The one thing that's important to notice is that under articles, I have two components. I have an articles component, which will list a number of articles, and there's an article singular component, which is then going to show the entire article. Okay, so ng-serve, locals 4,200, 4,200, and voila, hello Angular Rome, and you all love the Jamstack, right? So this is our, now the amount of time that it took me to put together the Colosseum in SVG, that was, here's the thing, this bit here was 90% of my time where I spent on this project. The rest was the 10%. But if I click articles, then we have an image, we have an article title, another article, and another article. And if we click on it, then we see content that I copied about Rome from Wikipedia. Okay, there's nothing special about this, right? Okay, so standard Angular app, right? First question, where does the data come from? So the data comes from a headless CMS, which I forgot to open. So the headless CMS that I'm using here is called Storyblock. Why am I using Storyblock? No actual reason. I just wanted to try them. And I thought it would be fun and interesting, but let me show you how an actual headless CMS works. Okay, let me zoom in on this as well a bit. So what you see is a headless CMS, right? So it's a hosted headless CMS. They basically give you all this interface to manage your content, to manage your data sources, manage components. You can do a lot here. And if I click on content, these are the articles that I have. Okay, so those were the articles that you saw inside your application. And here's IDs of March. It has a title, it has published, it has an author, it has an excerpt, and then it has the body, and it has a link to an image as well. Okay, so I can now manage this, I can update this, I hit publish, and the headless CMS will publish this particular article. Now, how do I access this inside Angular? And we're still not talking about Scully, we're still just talking about a standard Angular application. I created a service. Yep. I need to change my access token now. But basically, what I use is the Storyblock JavaScript client. Okay, so Storyblock as a headless CMS, they provide you with various, integrations. And for an Angular application, all you need to do is use their JavaScript client. And what they do is, obviously, you create an access token in the interface, you add it here, you then get this Storyblock client, and then they have get story and get stories as two methods that they expose, right? So it's very straightforward what they do. Get stories would then return all the stories from the headless CMS, and get story returns a single story based on the slug. The slug being almost like an ID for the individual articles. Okay, so it's a very simple thing to do. And what this returns really, we could actually print that out, or maybe I've done that already in the console. So what that returns to us here, no, I removed it, but I can put it back here. So if I go to articles component, yep, articles, Storyblock, get stories. Okay, it's here. So let's just do console.log this.stories and just refresh here. So what I get back from Storyblock is, an array of objects with the actual content. So again, remember what I said about the headless CMS. Headless CMS allows us to manage the content, but it's agnostic to how we display that content. And because Storyblock is an API-based headless CMS, they give you an API to access the content itself, right? So everything that I ever wanted to know about this article, including the content that I added, is available to me here in a form of an API call. Okay, and now I can access this, and all I do is iterate through this on this page, and of course draw the user interface around it. So the next thing would be, okay, so now we have the Angular application, and we could now run ng build, right, to create a sort of production build of our application, which would be good, but it would use a lot of JavaScript, and it wouldn't be really a static page. We still use a lot of Angular, and we can just do that. I think I've already done that because there's something, yeah, so it's right here. There's a lot of JavaScript in here, and all I got was an index.html file in here. I get article, wait, no, wrong folder. Oh, sorry, it deletes, sorry, deleted everything. So ng build did delete everything. So let's wait for that to finish. Again, I'm not showing anything new yet, but I just want you to understand how Scully works and what Scully does here. So we have Angular Rome, we got the index.html and a whole bunch of JavaScript files, which is, again, if you use Angular, you've seen this. we could now serve this, and we would still need JavaScript enabled to be able to see that page, right? If I disable JavaScript in my browser, I would get a very limited functionality of my production Angular build. So what Scully does, and what is this whole theory behind Scully, is that they said, what if I take a look at all the available routes that are in my application, and I generate a static file for each of the application, each of the routes that I find, which means that if you think about it, the routes in my application are, there's home, which is not running anymore, but so there was home, there's /articles, and then there's a route for each of the articles to be displayed. So Scully will intelligently scan our application, go through the routes it finds, and it will generate a static HTML that will have everything that we need to serve it up to any browser anywhere in the world without any server being involved. Okay. Now to add Scully to your application, and I'm going to cheat because I've done that and I forgot how to do that, but basically it's wait. Getting started, Scully, sorry, yeah, okay. I just want to copy it from here so that you see it. So all you need to do is literally do this, right? So ng add Scully io/init. It's going to, I think, ask you a bunch of questions, and it's going to update all the files that it needs to work, and it's going to add the new file as well. So it's going to update your Angular JSON, and it's going to create this file, which I'm hoping you can see. And the file name is always going to be Scully dot name of your Angular project. In this case, mine is Angular-Roma .config.js, and that is going to be your main configuration file to configure how Scully is going to work. Now, let me open this, and this is super great, right? So if you think about this, the articles that I added are sort of dynamic because they come from a headless CMS, right? Therefore, I need to tell Scully that if you're going to generate the routes for the articles, how you should do that. We need to basically tell Scully, hey, Scully, this is my headless CMS. These are the routes I expect you to statically generate. And that's what you see here. So basically it says, I'm saying get all the articles, go to story block, get all my stories, and I'm going to return this object. And this is the object that Scully requires, that it has a root property with a value. And you will see the result of this in just a second. You can also add root validation. You can do a lot of additional things. You could also configure where the output of the Scully statically generated HTML files should be. And in this case, I didn't change anything because the default is dist/static. And then I also specify the custom root definition. I say, if you ever encounter /article/slug, then use the get all articles, and maybe you could think about this as a resolver kind of thing, right? So get all articles is the function that we wrote. So it's saying it to Scully that if you go to /articles and you find this root, execute this function to find the actual proper value for that root and then generate that HTML for us. Okay. So what I've done, so we can run this. npm run, and in here you can see that also package.json got updated because now Scully and Scully serve got added. So I can do npm run Scully. And this is going to be very interesting because the process is that first of all, you need to do an ng build of your project. Once you do an ng build, you can then run Scully. Okay, so first you build your Angular application, then you need to run Scully. So let's take a look at the output here. Okay, so first of all, Scully automatically executed this scan routes option. And we can just take this and just run this on our own. So npm run Scully scan routes. And this is just going to go through our Angular application. It's going to find all the routes that it can. And it's going to find Okay, so it's going to find all the articles that we have. So here's one article, here's another article, and it's going to generate those into their own appropriate static files. Okay, so this was the slug, and if you take a look here, static articles, basically an index.html got generated in an article folder representative of the article itself. Plus, it gives you statistics. It says, I generated 6 pages, 31 seconds. So that's total for the 6 pages, 0.19 pages per second, etc., etc. And the end result of all of this is that now you have under the dist folder, because remember that's what we specified here, you now have a static folder where you have an index.html, you have all the JavaScript again. But what's more important is that you now have 3 or 2 additional folders in this case, indicating the 2 routes, right, about and articles. If I open articles, I now have an index in there. And for each of the article slugs, I also have an index.html file for each, which means I could just open this HTML, put it on a an edge server of some sort, and it would display me the entire article with the content, with the styling, with everything. Okay. Now the reason why it's a very big file, and I do apologize for that, is because I added Tailwind CSS, which I shouldn't have. Ignore that. But what matters is that you have the actual content right here, right? So that's the actual article content in a single HTML file. So what I'm going to do now is just go into, actually I created a server for this, I think. So there's a server. So I'm just going to serve up the static folder, okay? So the folder that we just created using Scully. So I'm going to do node.server.js port 80. And what I'm going to do is go to localhost. And what I have here is the statically generated Scully site. Okay, I can click on articles, then I have the list of articles here, and I can open this, and this now works. Okay, and what's great about this is if I now go here and say disable JavaScript, refresh this, everything is still going to work. Okay, I still have my content, I still have the images, I could refresh this, everything works. Remember, I do not have JavaScript enabled, and yet I'm looking at an application that was written in Angular, but the reason why everything works is because of Scully and because of the statically generated HTML content. On top of that, what this also means, try to make this a bit bigger, is that the document, it's actually cached now. So it shouldn't be 3.4 megabytes. I'm so sorry. That's Tailwind CSS. That was a very immature decision that I've done. But let's go to home. Okay, still anyway. So what you should see here is a much smaller file size. Trust me, it's really small. It's Tailwind CSS, and I messed up something because I wanted to make the application look pretty. But basically, when you exclude all the JavaScript and everything, of course the statically generated HTML content is going to be much smaller than if you include all the JavaScript that Angular puts into application. And also the fact that I can disable JavaScript and everything works, I think is really great. And what happens if I add a new article now? So let's do a new entry. Live test. This is an article, create, live test, published. What's the date today? 28th. So maybe yesterday. Hello, long article here. And okay, we're also going to talk about this asset manager. So this is going to be APIs in action, and I'm going to show this to you in a moment. I need to log in to add an image. I'm going to show you the power of APIs as well. Okay, so what I have now is basically inside Storyblock, I see all my images from Cloudinary. So I'm just going to add one random image to that article. This seems like a suitable one. Okay, and just do publish. Okay, so now I have published a new article. And now I am going to say npm run Scully. So this is now going to hopefully find, so how many did it find? It said 6 pages. So now it should generate 7 because it should see that there's a new article. Indeed, it generated 7 pages. And now if I do server, then we have the statically generated page here with the new article, right? Now, API. So first of all, notice that that's my picture here. So there are 2 pictures that you see here, right? There's a hero image, and there's my picture on the bottom here. It's sort of the author of this article. So I'm using Cloudinary, and I also said, you know, disclaimer, I do work for Cloudinary, but I want to show you something that's really cool, and hopefully that will make you understand why using APIs is really important in Jamstack. So let's imagine that we have this picture here, okay, which is a picture that we took of this lady, and we uploaded it to Cloudinary. Now, most of the developers who I talk to, if they know Cloudinary, they think, okay, yeah, I know it. I store my images there. That's it, which is great, and that's what I'm showing to you here. This is an image of that lady, which is 583 kilobytes in size, okay, and it's a JPEG image. But there's a lot of things that we can do with regards to images, because now you're probably thinking, okay, this is 583 kilobytes, which is, you know, not a lot. But let's imagine that this is the image that you use as your article header image right here, right? So this is, you know, an image that you use here, and then you have 10 articles on this page. So 10 times 583 kilobytes is getting, you know, that's more than just 583 kilobytes. That's 10 times more. Do you really want to use that much space, or that much, do you want to use up that much data for your end users, right? It's not a lot, but you know, you can do better. So let me show you a few things that we can do here in Cloudinary. First of all, I'm going to add f_auto to the URL, and I'm just using the URL manipulation here. We have an Angular SDK, which I'm using in the project, and I'm going to show that to you real quick as well. So you can make these manipulations using the SDK as well. So f_auto is going to say automatic format. It's going to take a look at the browser. Cloudinary is going to take a look at the browser. It will see that I'm using Google Chrome, and it will say, hang on, Google Chrome supports the image type or the image format of WebP. I can optimize WebP much better than I could optimize JPEG. Therefore, I am going to deliver a WebP for the requesting user if they use Chrome. Now, what's that going to mean is that we went from 583 kilobytes just to about 50, okay, just by serving the right format. I didn't change anything, but if you take a look at the headers, it does come back as an image WebP. Now, using this f_auto flag, if you will, if I copy this URL, and if I open it in, say, Safari, which I need to bring over here, so Safari does not support WebP. It has no idea what a WebP image is, and therefore, if you look at the network tab, what we render is I don't know if you can, oh, guys, zoom in like this. Perfect. What we render is an image JP2, which is JPEG 2000, which is an optimal format for Safari. Okay, and again, the size is going to be slightly different. Where do I see the size? So the size is 46 kilobytes, but still, it's not 583. Furthermore, q_auto is another flag that we have, which is automatic quality. So there's a lot of pixels in this image which the human eye doesn't detect, and there's absolutely no need to deliver that to the users, right? So I am showing you the entire image now. I'm going to hit enter. This is the new image. There's no visual deficiencies. There's no quality reduction, visible quality reduction in the image. The image didn't change. But what changed is that now we are down to 32 kilobytes in size, right? So again, just by adding these two optimizations, we saved many hundreds of kilobytes only for this one image. And then furthermore, because that's what I wanted to get to, is profile image, right? A lot of developers get a large image, shrink it down in CSS, and build a radius around it. Now, what if you could do all of that in server side, right? So what if I do width, 100, height 100? So I'm just adding another few sets of parameters. Now I get a really tiny image that's not even 2 kilobytes. But obviously, I want to find the face. So we have a feature that automatically detects the face and puts it in the center. And we need to set a crop option as well. Okay, and what if we now add a radius max for this as well? And now we have a beautiful profile image that's just 2.9 kilobytes in size. Okay, so we went from 580 something to 2.9. Now I am using these optimizations here because this is a big hero image, and what I do is source, app, articles, article component, I think. No. Wait, what? Article. Oh, maybe I forgot to. No, where is it? Articles component, article. I'll find it. Oh no, I'm sorry. I am using the URL. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am using the URL. We do have an Angular SDK, which basically exposes an image component, a video component, and then you can pass in all these various transformation options to the Angular component itself. I thought I was using that. That was for something else. I just used the URL here, okay? And then I added all these optimizations to the URL. As I said, you can do this via the Angular SDK as well if you want to. And even if you use that Angular SDK, what I want you to realize is that once you generate the static site will contain all the information in it, right? It's going to be statically available there for you. And I think the last thing that I want to show you, and let me see if this works, if I go to the About page, is the contact form, right? So remember, we now have, we don't have an execution environment, yet I have a contact form in here. And I mentioned this company called FormSpree. And if you take a look at here, I have a form. Trust me, when I first saw this, it blew my mind. All I need to do, you don't even need to register with FormSpree. All you need to do is say action equals to formspree.io and then the email address that you want to use, that you want to receive the message to, okay? Then you need to add a name property so that they know what you're talking about, what the name is, what the email is, and you just fill out the form and it works. It's just beautiful, right? So I can say something, or maybe let's not email myself. So John, hello, this is a test message. Now the first time around, so it's going to probably offer some validation. So the first time around, when you do this, you need to say, I'm not a robot. This form needs activation. So what you need to do is log into your email. But remember, once you deploy a site, this happens only once. Okay, so I will bring over my email inbox here. You get this email, you click activate form. It is now done, and you will also get this email, right? Name, the email, and the message itself. There's no need to execute server-side code to how do I process this form. All you need to do is utilize this API provider, and the key is really just here. That's all that you have to do in the world of Jamstack. Again, statically generated site, but it's not as static as you would think a static website would look like. Right. So let me finish the presentation, and we'll take a look at the questions as well. So I have a few links here that you can take a look at to learn more about the Jamstack, Cloudinary, Scully. I'm also going to give you access to this repository so that you can take a look at this sample project. It's currently private, but I'm going to change it to be public. List of static site generators, list of headless CMSs. Take a look at the Jamstack ecosystem. Look at what's out there. Just see whether there's an API for a particular use case that you want to do. I also mentioned a video course or resource. So the website Jamstack.training. So that's the actual URL. So it's Jamstack.training. Is a website that I run, and at this time there are 7 free video courses. Actually, all of the video courses are free, but there are 7 of them available on this site. All training material based on various Jamstack projects. So there's one that's called Introduction to the Jamstack. There's no code, it's just the core concepts. There's some that talk about serverless functions, and there's some that talk about various API providers. Just take a look at there if you're interested in the Jamstack. And what's really, and I'm really hoping that's going to happen. So Aaron Frost, who is one of the creators of Scully, I'm going to have a meeting with him tomorrow, I think, tomorrow. Fingers crossed, he's going to do a course on Scully on this website as well. So I'm hoping that very soon you will also see some Scully content. If he doesn't do it, I will do it. I just rather not spend time on this because there's another 2 or 3 video courses I'm recording at the same time. So again, do check this site out. It's all for free. Last slide. So I mentioned Cloudinary. You saw what we can do. We also have this program called the Media Developer Experts. So if you work with images or videos and you blog about it, and you want to be connected with like-minded individuals, then we have the platform for you. We are building this media developer community. We can also sponsor your events, help you get started with podcasts. We also buy you some gear. So if you're interested in this program, this is the link to check. Do apply. And then you will be interviewed, and if we see that you'll be good addition to the program, then we will of course accept you. And with that, grazie mille. Remember, what you saw today with regards to Scully is just the beginning. There's a lot more that you can do with it. It's still, the documentation is something that they're still building. There are still some bugs in the actual implementation as well, but they are working on it. Do check it out, do use it, and I do hope that you also enjoyed this presentation. So I guess it's now time for questions.
Thank you, Tamas.
Thank you. So let me see the questions panel.
Allora, vi ricordo, potete fare domande anche in italiano, le leggeremo per voi, quindi potete utilizzare, vi ricordo, la chat oppure prenotarvi con l'alzata di mano per intervenire live. Non siete timidi, siamo qua.
Okay. In the meantime, I have a question.
Go for it.
About
we also have. Okay, first your question with Shannon, then we give the microphone to Nicola.
Perfect. Okay. When you add some article in your database, maybe I forgot some point, but if you add a new article in the database, you are going also to regenerate the static file of the website and redeploy it.
Okay, so I did forget to mention that. So where's my? You still see my screen, I suppose. So you have a lot of options, right? So you can. That's not the right browser. Where is it? Yeah. So you have a lot of options, right? So first of all, and I had that open, and I'm going to show just a different project for the sake of simplicity here. Okay, so this is a Netlify. I'm using Netlify here. you could use any other deployment platform. But what these companies like AWS, Amplify, Netlify, and Vercel allow you to do is to connect and connect your project with GitHub and with their product. So here I have, we can go through that here. So you say new site from GitHub, then you select one of your projects that you worked on, and I can select configure the Netlify app on GitHub, and I'm just going to select there's a lot of steps involved in here. Angular Roma,
maybe because it's private.
Rome, I think it's Rome, maybe. Save. So now Netlify will have access to that repository. Okay. And I can now specify a build command and the publish directory. So I can now say npm run Scully. Publish directory is dist and static. I could add environment variables and other things, and I can now say deploy site. Okay, so now what's going to happen is that every time when I make a change inside my Scully application, they will know, so Netlify will know, and they will do an automatic redeploy of my application. Now, you can hook this up with the CMS as well. So inside the CMS, you can say every time when I probably won't find it here, but basically you can say every time when I add a new workflow, so basically there's a setting in here that says if you publish a new article, that should trigger something. What it should trigger the build, or it should trigger some sort of a git commit message that says, hey, I just added a new article, git commit something. Then Netlify is going to also realize that, and it will do an automatic deploy. Okay, and you can see that this is now building something here behind the scenes. Okay, so there's a few steps involved, but eventually you can set up a pipeline whereby you add the new article that's going to regenerate, the Scully page, and okay, there's some error in here, but you get the point. Basically, it says executing your command, it goes through your articles, and I forgot to run ng-build. I said that during the presentation that you need to do ng-build, and then you run Scully. Okay, so you can set up this pipeline to say, I published a new article, generate a new build, then run Scully, and then Netlify will deploy that for you. It's even easier when you don't involve a headless CMS, because I mentioned that you can also just get Scully to build a blog for you, and they have that use case on their website. So they have this engine to generate a blog. It's right here, create a blog. Okay, so you can actually init a blog. It will read Markdown, and all you need to do is create a folder. I don't know where they actually should, but basically you can specify a folder where your posts are going to be Markdown. And then if you think about it, now you have your own sort of CMS, which is based on your file system. So when you add a new post, you say new file, new Markdown file, or you use this, generate a new post, you type in your post, you save that. The next logical thing would be to say, oh, git commit, git push. And because you do that to save the new article, because you do that, Netlify is going to say, oh, there was a new commit, I should redeploy my site. And it's just going to do that redeploy cycle. So we can try that. So even though it fails, I can make a change, just add the space there. So I can say now git add updated, I don't know, maybe edit a new post, okay? Edit a new post. What did I do? Git commit. Okay, git push. Oh, I probably changed a lot more than I was supposed to, doesn't matter. And then without me doing anything, if I go back to Netlify, there's a new build with my commit message already happening, right? So now, if I would have added a new markdown file and did git commit git push, Netlify would say, oh, okay, new content, I need to run the user commands again. Now, the user command should really have been, and that's my bad, where is it? Build and deploy. Edit should have been ng build and run Scully, right? Because you need to do it that way. And then all of that, the rest of it is automatic. And what's great is that you will get a URL as well. And that's where my blog would be. I mean, while I'm answering questions, I can actually try to do a redeploy here. So trigger, clear cache, and deploy. Let's just start from scratch and see what happens. And then once you have that site, you just come here and say overview, domains, and now I could, you know, add a custom domain to this. So I could now set up myblog.com, and now myblog.com would be a Netlify site, which is a statically generated site via Scully. It's all, the whole, you know, deployment workflow is really, really easy using these tools with the Jamstack.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
This is building. We'll see what happens here. You're welcome. Okay, and there was another question somewhere.
Yes. Nicola,
Yes. Nicola?
Nicola, puoi parlare, ti ho dato l'audio. Devi attivarlo. Ok, bravo.
Prova. Mi sentite?
Sì, ti sentiamo. Ok.
Sentiamo.
Okay.
Ciao Nicola.
Yeah.
Ciao, Luciano. No, I have just a question about serverless, about hot and cold start. If you have some tips for us, because I don't want to have my query in my app, no. So I prefer to have, you know, a cloud function or my query, but there is the problem, no, about hot and cold. No, if you.
Yes. So yeah, that's a tricky one. So for those of you who are not familiar with, you know, serverless and stuff, basically what happens is the serverless function gets executed in a container, and basically it follows this, what I call a pay-as-you-go model, whereby, you know, you have a function, a container gets fired up, function gets executed, returns the data, container shuts down. Okay, and then the next time you call that function again, the new container needs to be created. So basically there's this lag. So there are ways to do this. So you can basically run another or part of your script that periodically does something very small. So you basically keep that container active at all times. So that's one way of doing it. But by nature, that's how serverless functions work. I also found that it was with versal functions. So versal, you know, Zeit, that they used to be called last week. They are very good at caching the responses from serverless functions. So they actually have options where you can say, I want to cache the response from that serverless function, and they have this model called stale while revalidate, SWR, whereby you say, first, when you execute your function, first go to the cache. If the data is there, just return that, and behind the scenes, you know, sort of transparently to the user, update the cache with the latest data. So maybe that's another model that would fit your use case. But basically, you know, one way of doing that is to try to make the connection active at all times. So, you know, you don't have that cold restart or cold startup thing happening.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I also see a text-based question. If I'll just read that out loud. So, hi, hello.
Okay.
In Gatsby, there is a very, so it's very small. There's a very nice plugin system to add features to our web application. Has Scully something like it? Yeah, so it's the Gatsby store, right? Where you get to add all these wonderful plugins. No, Scully does not have that yet. Remember, Scully is 3 months old, maybe. That's why I basically had to build that story block plugin. But eventually, if I remember correctly, they had discussions about adding something like this. So users, so for example, now I could, release this Storyblock custom plugin that I wrote, and then, you could use it in the same way, how someone else could release another plugin with another headless CMS. So eventually, I'm sure they're going to have something like that, but now they only have, I think, a Markdown reader and a JSON file reader, which they provide out of the box as sort of a plugin on top of Scully. Okay.
Okay, there is
I don't see any
another
more questions in here.
Yes, by Giorgio. Okay, Giorgio, you can talk.
Prova, mi sentite?
Yeah, perfect.
Hi everyone, thank for this talk. I have a question. Scully is only a replacer for WordPress, or have another kind of opportunity of a use case?
No, so Scully is not a CMS. Scully is a static site generator. So what Scully allows you to do is you have your Angular application, and it will generate static HTML pages from your Angular application, which then you can put on any static hosting provider. Even with JavaScript disabled, it will show you the content. Okay.
Okay.
A headless CMS, what you saw like Storyblock that I'm using here, allows you to manage your content. So what I was showing you here is that you have an Angular application, you have a CMS, you pull the data from that CMS, put it into your application, and based on the combination of Scully and Storyblock, you generate a static site.
Okay.
Okay, so there's no, we're not talking about replacing WordPress or anything. For your information, if you like WordPress, WordPress has this thing called, what do they call it? WordPress, headless WordPress? That sounds like a mouthful. Maybe. Anyway, there's a headless version of WordPress now, which means that you can access the data inside WordPress with the freedom of being able to create a front-end interface on your own using whatever you want. So they also have this headless CMS solution now.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And just if you, I'm still sharing my screen, I think. So this now finished, right? So what you see here inside the Netlify logs is what you saw in my CLI. And now what happens is that if I click on this URL, my site is now active and alive, given the fact that my internet works. There we go. Okay, so this is my application. Come on, internet, running live on Netlify. So this is now a deployed Scully app. Okay, still works. And now if I would make a change, as we saw before, git commit, git push, new deploy would happen. Netlify would go through again the whole steps, ng build, npm run Scully, and then the end result would be that I would see the updated site available on the Netlify CDN globally. I would see the site updated globally. End of sentence, sorry.
Okay. Another question about the difference with the Angular Universal.
With Angular, so I didn't hear the last part. You have a question about the difference between?
Yes, about the difference between Scully and Angular Universal. Because with Angular Universal, we are going to generate server-side rendering for our web page. And with Scully, we are doing less or more the same thing, right?
Correct.
Okay, so why I have to choose Scully instead of Angular Universal? Okay,
so I'll go back to that slide because I have that in the very beginning. Here. So I think the most important point is the last one on the right-hand side here for Scully. So Angular Universal was, I find it complicated personally, but that's just a personal opinion.
Me too.
Me too. Good. And hopefully, you now saw how easy it is to generate static stuff with Scully. So the main difference is that Scully was purposefully built for generating static sites. That's the only thing that it does. Okay, it doesn't do all the rest of the stuff that Angular Universal does because it doesn't need to. Furthermore, as far as I know, in Angular Universal, when you want to generate routes for your application, you need to say, I want to pre-render something for this route and then for that route, and you need to kind of do that manually. In Scully, as you saw, it goes through your application with minimal configuration, and it's going to find all the routes that you have, and it's going to generate a static static HTML page for you. Plus, just by adding a few lines of code in this is the entire Scully configuration file, 31 lines. That includes my Storyblock stuff, which is either relevant or not. But basically, this is how you specify the routes that are sort of dynamic, that Scully needs to be aware of. You specify a handler function for it, and I'm just using Storyblock, and it says, hey, this is the where the routes are found, and this is what you should generate for me. And this is happening automatically. I don't need to manually specify each and every single route that I want to create. And also, Scully has some built-in plugins where it allows you to actually read Markdown files. So it can work with Markdown files out of the box. It understands Markdown files, and it will generate HTML from those Markdown files. Again, as far as I know, Angular Universal cannot do that, at least not today.
Okay.
So these are the main differences. I think, to me, as I said, the most important one is this one here, because Scully was built purposefully for achieving the single task of generating static HTML. I think that's one of the key things here.
Okay, thank you. I do some tests with Angular Universal, but it's very, very hard to develop something with Angular Universal. So
try Scully. Try Scully.
Okay, perfect. Do you know how Scully works with Firebase? It's good to deploy
Scully and Firebase. With regards to deployment to
yes,
Firebase hosting, or honest answer, no clue. I haven't tried it. I used Firebase. I never actually used Firebase hosting. One thing that I could think of is, if you have data in Firebase and you want to generate static pages based on that, it would be just a matter of replacing all this logic with the Firebase related logic. And I guess, hosting, Firebase is I would consider it as a static hosting provider. So instead of hooking it up with Netlify, I'm sure you can hook it up with Firebase as well, and just host basically all you need to do is host this static folder, which is the result of you running, Scully on Firebase. But as I said, I don't quote me on that because I haven't done that.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. We have other questions?
I do have one.
Sure.
So, okay. So Tamas, in your experience, which is the best headless CMS? Because I have heard a lot about Strapi, and a lot of people are pushing for that. So what's your opinion in general?
Well, so we have another hour, right? No, it's a very difficult question because it will always be dependent on your use case, on what you want to do, right? So for example, you mentioned Strapi. I used Strapi and I like Strapi, but Strapi is something that you need to deploy. Okay, you need to, find a server, maybe deploy it into Heroku, set up the database. You need to do that. but once you do that, it's good. Now, as you saw, Storyblock, it's a hosted CMS, a hosted headless CMS, meaning that you go to storyblock.com, you log in, and you have access to everything, right? And it's still customizable. Plus, it also allows you to generate entire pages. There's Netlify CMS. So, for example, if you already use the Netlify deployment platform, you can enable Netlify Identity, which is their authentication platform. You can enable Netlify CMS, which will basically read Markdown files, and it will present you with a nice editor interface to manage those Markdown files. So you get like a text editor, you know, like a what you see is what you get type of editor to modify those files. You know, is that your use case? You know, you want to have that, then, you know, use that. Do you want to use API-based ones? Do you want to use ones that not only give you a RESTful API, but also expose data via GraphQL? You know, then you find that. So there's so many ways that you can use. You know, some of them have built-in media management. So do you have a lot of images that you want to display? Then you need to find a headless CMS that has a lot of support for media assets, media content, right? So I can tell you that I used a lot. So I used Strappy, Netlify CMS, Storyblock, Cosmic.js, Contentful, and probably I'm forgetting a few. I loved all of them. They have different use cases, but then it's, you know, part of my job is that I test these things. I create demos. My suggestion is, you know, take a look at what they offer. You know your use case, you know what you want to achieve, and then based on that, you can try, you know, you can filter it down to, you know, 2 or 3, and then you just go and use one.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. So it seems that's all. I want to say again, thank you, Tamas. We hope to see you in Rome soon.
You will, trust me.
Yeah, next Codemotion Rome.
Next Codemotion Rome, and I want to eat porchetta and all that good stuff. So let's do that. Let's do that soon.
Some pizza or matriciana, it's very, very common.
I actually cooked that to my wife as well the other day, so yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Good.
Also, if you,
okay.
so yeah, if someone has any questions later on, let me bring this up. Not this one, this one. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'll be more than happy to help you with anything Jamstack or Scully related, and then try to answer any questions on there as well.
Okay.
Okay, Luciano, want you to do the last message to all the attendees that are still online with us, or do you want me to close?
No, we are very near to close.
Okay.
The community come back next month for sure with another meetup, or maybe 2. Depends from the availability of all the team. And hope to see you soon, guys.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to all. Thanks, Tamas. Thanks to all the community. See you next meetup.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ok. Non riesco a stoppare.
Neanche io. Ciao. Ciao.